Their aura is unequal.
Well, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Or whatever. And they make it a little more raspy, and I follow directions.
Their contents are legendary.
In fact, that little sheet you see is his concept drawing.
Their attitude is embraced. Tune in to one of the most up and rising kaiju-sized groups within our community. So go ahead and watch all of their creative content, including that of the Raw Attitude live interview, where they have special guests ranging from actors, directors, toy creators, artists, and many, many more. You can also find them on multiple of other social media platforms, ranging from Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook. You could even sit back and watch your favorite classic monster movie and even watch us go through one of the most iconic games on Twitch. Featuring your hosts, Eric Stoll, Adrian Settle, Joe Myers, Samson West, Jordan Adorno. They are the Monsters with Attitude.
What's going on, listeners with Attitude? As always, I am your host with the most, Mr. Joe Mama, the one that is married to all these crazy kaiju. And today, oddly enough, I am flying solo. I am doing an interview all by my lonesome because Eric left me high and dry. He doesn't love me or appreciate me. And so it's just me by myself. I'm kidding. Eric is actually producing today. But in all seriousness, I am very excited to talk to our guest today. His name is Ryan Parott. I didn't actually ask him how to pronounce his last name. I guess I should have done that in the background. So I hope I got it correct. But he is a comic book writer and screenwriter. Most notably for me, he worked on the Power Rangers comics from Boom Studios, which, if I'm being honest, I've always loved Power Rangers, but his work in those stories really almost gave it new life for my love of Power Rangers. So I'm so excited to actually sit down and talk with him. Our next guest, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ryan Parott.
How's it going?
Hey, Ryan, how are you?
It's actually Parrott, but that's okay.
Parrott, you know what? Yeah. I knew it.
That's not good.
I was gonna ask and I wasn't sure, and I forgot to ask. So shame on me.
No, it's all good.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here at the Monsters with Attitude. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. That intro is quite impressive. I was sort of just kind of rocking out to it, so it was very impressive.
Thank you. Shout out to Jordan, one of our other co-hosts. He made it all himself. So
very well done.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So I want to start like we always do, kind of an icebreaker question with all of our guests. Were you a fan of Godzilla, Power Rangers, Toku, Sentai, all that stuff before your work in the industry, or did you get acquainted to it after?
Probably. I mean, I grew up on Power Rangers. I grew up on that world. I think I was 14 when Power Rangers first started putting on Saturday mornings and whatnot. So I grew up kind of enjoying that. And I've been aware of kaiju stuff for a while. Obviously, with Godzilla, I still think Godzilla -1 was probably the best movie of that. I mean, was it last year? Was it 2 years ago? Last year? Yeah.
Well, technically 2003 right into 2004, but yeah, I mean.
Yeah. But yeah. So I've been a fan of that stuff for a really, really long time, and some of my friends actually do stuff for Brian Buccellato, who did the Godzilla versus Justice League book King Kong and Godzilla versus Justice League and stuff like that. He's been doing that for a while, so he's been telling me it's been fun. Like when we did a signing the other day together, and I just read his stuff while I was sitting there the entire time, and I was just like, "This is really good, man. You did a good job." And so yeah, it's been fun. But yeah, I grew up on that stuff sort of tangentially, but I've gotten to know more of it as I've gotten into the world.
Yeah. Total side note, but yes, the Godzilla Kong Justice League is super fun. We actually talked about it on the show, and I believe there's a sequel. They're going to do a part 2. I think sometime this year, which we're all
I think that's been announced. If it hasn't, so here we go. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was announced, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it has to. Yeah.
But no, that's very cool. So okay, you were aware of it. Did you have a favorite Ranger, favorite season?
I mean, I grew up on the originals, so like that's the boring dumb answer.
Same here.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the one that I liked, I like RPD, like our SPD is really good. Time Force is really good. There's like they're all really interesting and sort of like I've always felt like Power Rangers is sort of like the American version of Doctor Who a little bit, where it's like everyone you meet has like their own favorite. There's each iteration is sort of its own is like as sort of like a reflection of the time when it was made. And like it's like, and you can argue about it. You're like, oh, I like this season more than that, or I hate this season and all that stuff. And the cool thing is it's all technically kind of in continuity. Like it all. I mean, it's its own. Obviously, it's a little wonky with different different universes and stuff. But I love that something. It's 25 years. It sort of embraces its cheesiness when it wants to. It has really great moments in it, and then everybody has a favorite. So that's the way I've always seen it. So it's like everybody has their own favorite.
Yeah. I love that. I've never heard somebody explain it like Power Rangers is the American Doctor Who. And that honestly makes total sense. And I agree 1,000% because with the character changes and yeah, that's amazing. What was your favorite Ranger?
Here's the problem with me answering this question is I know too many of them now. And so
you didn't. Before you met them, who was your favorite?
My favorite, I mean, I think it was probably Jason in the first, like Jason, just because he thought he was really cool. I kind of left the series before Tommy became like a really big deal. So I was never like a huge Tommy fan. I respected it and I knew how big he was. And obviously he sort of eclipsed everybody in regards to just sort of how long he was on the show and everything. Adam, I love Adam. He was great. Yes. And then I become really good friends with Amy Jo Johnson and David Yost. So like I have to say that those two people are as nice and as awesome and as generous as anybody. So like just as people, I love them. So I have to inherently love their characters too. So.
Right. Okay, so that's I kind of already knew.
I think I picked all of them, so I probably was like hedging my bets a little bit. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think I read somewhere that you did say Jason, so I just wanted that on record because that is a friendly debate that we all have here at the MWA, where I am Team Jason for sure. And a couple of the other guys are, but we're divided between Jason and Tommy. So, but I just wanted it on record that you agree. One of the writers of the Power Ranger comics agrees that Jason is the best. So
Jason's awesome. I really loved writing that character. I think there was a lot of stuff that I got to do. There was a reason that I opened my run and sort of closed my run with that character. So, yeah.
Yeah. I actually, there's more on that later. I actually want to get to that because something you said is something I mimic. But before we get too deep into the Ranger stuff, when you were a kid, did you always know you wanted to work in comics or in the Hollywood adjacent industries, or was it something that you kind of stumbled upon?
Well, I mean, I grew up an artist. Like I grew up drawing all the time. Like that was sort of my identity all the way up through high school. I thought I was going to be a comic book artist. I made comic books with my friends in junior high. I went to art school, coming out of college, thinking I was going to go do that. I thought that's what it was going to be. And then right around like my sophomore year in college, I was like, oh man, I'm never going to be Jim Lee. I'm just never going to have the time and that ability and stuff. I wasn't bad, but I wasn't that good. And so I sort of transitioned away from that and sort of went into film and TV and ended up transferring to go to film school. And while I was doing that, that sort of became my passion and everything that I was working for. And so I did that for years. And it wasn't until I was but in college, I met a few guys. I kind of gave up comic books. I read it when I was in high school and all the way up. And then I kind of gave it up for a few years. And then my buddy, when I think my like sophomore year in college, was just like, hey, like, he's like, we went to a comic store, and he was like just grabbing some stuff, and he kind of reintroduced me to stuff that I hadn't really read in a long time, and so I got back into that, and so it was always sort of in the back of my mind. And then when I ended up working at Bad Robot with J.J. Abrams and all this as his assistant, yeah, so I worked there, and while I was doing that, Kyle Higgins was a friend of mine in college. I met him late after we both had graduated, both at the same college. And so he had made this movie called The League, and he was sort of trying to get into the comic book world. Excuse me. And so when he first moved up to Los Angeles, he was like like trying to get his stuff going. And so I lived like a few blocks away. And so he was always like, hey, would you mind coming over and like hanging out with me and we can break some story? And then I just helped him break story for a little while, and he sort of got his foot in the door. And so he did really well. And then in the middle of that, he ended up getting Nightwing and Deathstroke in like the same week when the New 52 started.
Wow.
And so, yeah, he was in the middle of writing a book called Batman Gets to Gotham. He was writing that. And they were like, hey, you got to bring on a co-writer to finish this because we need you to do these 2 other books. And so I was friends with him. So he was like, hey, he called me. I was at work, and he was like, would you be interested in writing Batman with me to just get this off my plate? I was like, so you're offering me the first comic book I ever write is Batman? Yeah, I'll do that. I'll help you. Yeah. So I went over there. I'd work all day, and then I would drive over there after work, and we would write the book. We wrote the whole thing in like 2 weeks, two issues in 2 weeks, which was really fast. And because of that, JJ found out about that and was like, oh, do you want to do other comics? And he was like, we do Star Trek comics for the new Kelvin universe. And so I was like, yeah, I love Star Trek. And so I sort of transitioned into that. And because of that, it got me into a little bit more comics. And then comics sort of became my life. I still worked in TV. I still work in TV today and other things. But comics has been such a fun, it's such a weird thing to go in thinking you're going to be an artist in comic books, completely get out of it, get into film and TV, and then find yourself back into comic books. So it's a weird, it's been a weird circle, but I'm really happy that I got to go back into them. I love them. It sort of reactivated my passion for it. And it's just like, it's so crazy how, because when I was a kid, I was like, when I was really into comics, I was like 14, and artists were the thing, right? Like it was like Rob, it was all the Image guys, Rob and Todd and Jim Lee and all those guys. Like I worshiped those guys. I bought every single one of those books. And then somewhere in the I guess like 10 years after that, it feels like the whole industry shifted away from artists and sort of into writers. And so like, it was weird to kind of start like wanting to be in it because of the art, and then becoming a writer, and then finding out that was actually a more, not a beneficial, but like a thing that mattered more, I think, and it had more weight in the industry. So it was kind of neat to be able to get into that. Like I still tell my editor on Rogue Sun, I want to draw at least one cover of Rogue Sun at some point, but I'm so slow that it'll take me forever.
That's great. That's fantastic. So you wanted originally to be an artist, and so there wasn't anything necessarily negative or bad. It wasn't, somebody didn't turn you down. You yourself made that decision. Hey, I think I want to go this way instead. I realized that I was decent, but I wasn't like, I didn't, that the whole 10,000 hours thing. Like, it was just like, I just knew I was never going to be able to put in the amount of time that it would take to sit over that board and draw to get my stuff to the level that I could do it for a living. Like I was like, and I think I also started realizing that like, as much as I love the art, like I actually liked the stories more. Like I realized I was sort of gravitating. I was like, oh, like, because I would play so this is sort of something I don't think I ever talked about. Like, but like I had a G.I. Joe character that I kept until I was like 24. Like I had that thing with me at college and stuff, and I would just play with it. I would just play and do stories. And when I was a kid growing up, like I would just wander around in the backyard with just one thing, and I would just do entire stories. I would do like superhero stories and stuff like that. And so I realized, kind of going back, thinking about it, I was like, you know what? It's like, I like the stories. I remember like, there's those first issues of Chris Claremont's X-Men with Jim Lee, where you see like Gambit and Rogue go on a date together and they get attacked by, I think it's like Weapon X or something like that. And I was like, I love the idea of doing stories about the X-Men, but like, or Batman, but it was like them doing nothing. Like they were just like, oh, they go to like the beach or they hang out at like a coffee shop. Like I liked all the interpersonal stuff and all the weird character moments and stuff. And it wasn't about like fighting Magneto and 50 Sentinels or any of that stuff. It was like all that stuff. So I think I sort of realized that it was like, also, writing's a lot faster than art. Like one comic book writer can do like 4 or 5 books a month. One artist can do 1 book, and so I kind of hedged my bets and allowed myself to get to do more things by getting involved in that. But I think I just realized I liked the stories as much as I liked the actual creating them and the art stuff. Yeah. Well, and like Eric is saying here, it makes them more human, more relatable, and I think that's why your Power Ranger comics were so successful and impacted even lifelong fans like myself, because it gave a new perspective or a different angle to some of these characters that we didn't see in the 21, 22-minute show, excluding commercials, obviously,
Right, yeah.
to where it was just essentially, I mean, Haim Saban himself has even said the show was a vehicle to sell the toys.
Right.
It wasn't meant to be, a teen soap opera or a preteen soap opera or anything, or young adult type thing. It was meant to be like, hey, here's some good looking cast members that can, act, at least a little bit enough in their young age to do A, B, and C, and we can show the Megazords and the monsters and
Right.
sell you all their stuff. So yeah, I like that of the story is important, and I agree with that. I really do.
Well, when I came on board, the way that I got involved in Power Rangers was I was on a panel. It was a licensed paneling at like Long Beach Comic Con, and one of the editors of Boom was the moderator of the panel, and we just were talking about everything. And after the panel, she was like, "Do you guys want to go get a drink afterwards and talk a little bit?" So we got a drink, and her and I got into a debate about the ending of the Winter Soldier movie. Like I didn't love the ending, and she loved it and was like, "You're wrong." And we debated for like 45 minutes, and she's like, "I knew you would be my people after that like long debate." And so she called me a few weeks later, and she says, "Hey, I don't know if you know about this, but they're making a new Power Ranger movie." And she's like, we're interested in doing a potential sequel as a comic book. Would you be interested? So I basically came in, I got to read the script one time, and then I wrote like the thing in like 3 or 4 weeks. It was a really fast turnaround. But I did a decent enough job with that the people at Saban, I think actually, was it Saban at the time? Yeah, Saban.
Mm-hmm.
Saban at the time were like, yeah, we liked his voice on stuff and thought he did a good job considering the circumstances. And so Daphne came to me and said, "Hey, so Kyle Higgins is running." Kyle didn't even know about this at the time. Like we weren't chatting about it. He's like, "Kyle Higgins is doing his run on Power Rangers. He's like 12 issues in. We want to do something that's a little bit more, it's like 70% kids in high school dealing with high school problems of being superheroes and 30% monsters. And we want to do something that's sort of grounded in that gives you, like you just said, gives us an opportunity to be less about the action and less about sort of the big world building and more about what's it like being a high schooler when you have superhero problems."
Right.
And she's like, "Would you be interested in doing that?" So I was like, "Absolutely." And so I told her, I was like, "I'd want to write it somewhat in the line of Buffy. I'd like to make it about using the monsters as sort of metaphors for kids, for daily problems, and make it about and really dig into the characters." Like one of the things that we talked about early on was, I was like, why is Jason so obsessed with martial arts? Like, what is it about that? Why did he walk into that lifestyle? And so we talked about that a lot. Maybe that we came up with the idea that maybe he had been a bully, and that the idea that creating that he was brought into martial arts as a way to give him balance and to give him sort of a code and to sort of channel his feelings and his anger issues and stuff like that, because I know that's how some people use martial arts. So that was something we talked about there. And the idea of making Billy and Skull friends when they were young kids. And then the idea is that they had sort of grown up and evolved, and now Skull was sort of picking on him. And it was just like finding all these fun little things that they never got to really explore on the show and sort of dig in there and just try and make everything just a little bit more relatable. And so that was the whole point of the book. And that was like one of my favorite, what I loved about Go-Go Power Rangers so much for me was it actually taught me what I like about comic books, like what I like about storytelling was I liked finding all the little tiny, like small details. I liked finding all of the things that you were unexpected and like helped you like, I think those Zord battles are fun, and I like the giant monsters, and I love all that stuff. That stuff's fun and it's great, but I always feel like those are always better if you like if the characters matter and the stakes matter, and you sort of you have more empathy for those characters. It makes those battles better. And if you don't, they're just cool. They'll be cool on spectacle alone, but if you can give them a little more gravitas, it just makes everything a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, you need to have the stakes, something to care about. Fighting is fun and it's, turn your brain off entertainment is great. But if there isn't some kind of stake to make you feel like, oh my gosh, this character needs to win to get the girl, save his family, whatever it is, you're not as connected for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
So you were actually pitched to come to Boom. That was one of my questions coming here. So, and they had already been working. So you came in and there was already kind of a story idea or a direction that they were heading.
it wasn't a story. It was more of a tone. They were like, we want to do a book because they're like, we want to do another Power Ranger book, but we don't want it to be exactly what Kyle's doing. Kyle's got his own stuff. He's building up the Draken and the coin list and doing sort of the larger world building stuff. And he was talking about, and his story was specifically told through the perspective of Tommy and those first days of him entering the team after being the Green Ranger. And they were like, we'd love you to do something that was a little bit more that the Go-Go was like, we'd love it to take place right after the pilot and kind of be, the way they sort of pitched it was like, it'd be cool if you could make it a story that sort of takes place in between the episodes. That sort of is in those early days. It's about those characters like trying to figure out their powers, trying to figure out their place in the world, figuring out being a team, like all that stuff. Like one of the reference points they kept saying was sort of the original Ultimate Spider-Man. Was that idea of like the really sort of grounded high school days and how they used all the Spider-Man villains to sort of show Peter slowly evolving through high school. And so they were like, we want to do something kind of in that tone. And so I was like, yeah. And so I came to them and sort of pitched them. Like it was Kyle actually, like when I told Kyle I was going to do the book, he and I were like, well, what can we do? And like the character of Matt, Kimberly's early first boyfriend, that came out of conversations that we were talking about, which was like, that was actually an interesting conversation, was like, it was technically kind of a prequel book, or it was like an early days book. And so we were like, how do you create stakes and tension if you know everybody's going to be okay all the time, because you know this takes place in the first season. So creating Matt as a character was somebody that we could put in danger. And also there was this idea of like, well, we know he's not around forever, so something obviously is going to happen to this guy. And so it actually kind of helped give us like a lot of sort of like questions and built out this sort of like it gave us this sort of like tangential thing that we could build out that would, we can put in peril and create some stakes and stuff. So that was the fun part of that. But that was their approach to it all, was just sort of like, can it be early days? Can it be a little smaller, a little less about the Zords and a little bit more about the Rangers?
I love that. Very quick backstory on the way I read comics. I wait until a trade comes out. I hate reading one and then having to wait. I am not a good, ask my wife. I am not somebody who waits well. I'm always like, come on, so I always wait and read it all together, or at least wait until there's several, books out to read. So I didn't know that this, Kimberly's boyfriend, Matt, I had seen, kind of peripherally on social media. I thought you guys were doing something. I thought that Matt was Jason at first. I thought you were having Jason and Kimberly be an item, and then Tommy coming in and kind of there being like a love triangle there. And I thought that, I was like, oh my God, like that's huge. Like, was there ever, and there was some other people on social media, one, kind of hypothesizing or fan theorying that any truth behind that, or
that we were going to make a love triangle between Kimberly and Tommy and Jason?
Yeah.
Not so much Jason. We never talked about that part of it. And I don't know why. It never felt like they were ever romantic on the show. And so, I mean, I don't think they ever were. So since they weren't ever romantic on the show, we felt like that wasn't really a thing. But we thought there was something interesting about the idea of bringing on the whole pitch for the Matt character came from the idea of, when I was in high school, I went to high school in Las Vegas, and the year before I went to school, they built a brand new high school. So they split the district in the middle. And so all the friends that I'd gone to junior high with, half of them went to one school and half of us went to the other. And so we would hang out with each other on the weekends for a little while, but then slowly over that first year, as we were going to high school, we realized you started to hang out more and more with the friends that you made at school, and you just sort of slowly drifted away. And so the picture that I came with was this idea of like, what if you did that and like 5 of your friends all became superheroes and one of them didn't, and the other 5 couldn't tell that one why they were not hanging out with him anymore, and why that character would be like, why is everybody so weird? Like the center of the friend group is suddenly on the outside looking in. So we really like that. But no, we never, I don't think, so that was the idea, was just to create somebody that Kimberly, that could have been like that. He was friends with Zach. Billy was like, he protected Billy, and Kimberly was like the guy that he actually brought Kimberly into the friend group because he was dating her. So that was the way we kind of associated, but we never actually used Jason The Jason thing, that ultimately the story we went with Jason was the idea of sort of creating sort of a Jason Trini relationship, which became kind of a big part of the series.
Yeah. I like that too. I always, like I said, I was always a big fan of Jason, which actually I think is a big reason why I liked Go-Go so much, because it not just fleshing out Jason, but all the characters. But and I know this is a hot button discussion or opinion that I will say. I personally am not a fan of Tommy. I respect everyone's opinion and being able to like Tommy. However, I think he is very overrated. And when he got on the show after once Jason, Trini, and Zach left, it seemed like it became, and on the show, that it became the Tommy Oliver show, sometimes featuring the other Power Rangers. And it just got very kind of boring. And I kind of fell away from it for a little while, and came back in Zeo and stuff like that. But so it was really cool to see you guys show so much love and respect or attention to characters like Jason. And it sounds like that was something that you were maybe at least somewhat familiar with and wanting to do, that you didn't necessarily want it to be about Tommy. You wanted it to be pre-Tommy. Is that?
Yeah, right? the pitch was, we were like, let's do the original 5. Let's not have Tommy in Go-Go at all, just to differentiate the two, because Tommy was such a big part of Kyle's run. It just felt like, okay, if Tommy's going to be sort of the point of view character in the main power line, let's have our book not be about that. Let's have it be about the original characters and sort of build it out that way. So it wasn't anything about like not liking Tommy. It was just more like a way to differentiate the two books a little bit. Yeah.
Were you, besides the 70%, 30% that you were talking about, what other guidelines do they give you?
The only other guidelines, I think it was like, these were some, it wasn't much guidelines, it was just more of like talking points. It was, one of the things we wanted to talk about was, I was like, I want Rito to win a little bit. Rito, like, I was like, it's kind of hard to create a villain that's always losing. And so one of the things we talked about was like, how do we find ways to help? One of the early mandates on the book was like, if she's gonna lose, she also has to win in every time. So we're gonna, she has to win something. And so like in one of the early fights, when they come up to the moon base, like they're able to get when they try to rescue the astronauts that are up from the original pilot, there was like, okay, they're gonna rescue the pilots, but they're gonna say their names, and so Rita knows who they are now. So there's like, let's give even just like a little win. She was like, oh, okay, now I know who you guys are, and so I can go after that way. Or when when they would beat her big monsters, she would kidnap Matt and turn Matt into a putty Matt, and then infiltrate him that way, and slowly break the group up. So even if she would lose, it would feel like there was a slow progression of at least her evolving and understanding that, like, yeah, it's like you have to, you might not win all the battles, but you don't have to win every battle to win a war, kind of thing. So that was the early talks we talked about. Any other mandates? I don't think so. I really enough. We had considered not putting Bulk and Skull in the book. Yeah, I think it was just more of, I was like, we have so many characters.
Yeah,
I don't know if I want to do that. And then ultimately, I was like, you know what? They do so much for the book. They're so funny. They have a lot of variety. They're very interesting characters. We can use them in interesting ways. We can put them in peril. We can use them as ways to like get a sense of the outside world outside of the Rangers. And so now looking back, I can't even imagine what that books would have been like if I hadn't put those guys in the book, because some of my favorite stuff writing came from those two characters. And so I'm really glad that we didn't make that. That would have been a bad mistake. But I can't think of any other major mandates.
Did they ever say like you can't? Could you kill a Ranger if you wanted to? Was there?
I mean, we could, like, we I think if I had really come in there and been like, hey, I want to kill Zach and bring in a new Ranger, I think they would have been okay with it. But we were trying to keep it relatively connected to the show. We didn't want it to be something where it felt like, I think the one thing we were worried about was if we started doing things that were really, really drastically different from the series, that people would start to, who like the show, would start to think, well, this book doesn't matter. It's its own alternate reality, and it's not really connected to what's going on. And so we were like, and we just felt like, since we were kind of working in conjunction with Kyle's run as being like they're all kind of in the same timeline, but just in different spots. We were a little bit worried that if I did something too drastically different, that it would make you feel like, well, which one of these books is canon and which one do we have to actually follow? So that's why Kyle and I kind of kept each other abreast of the stories we were doing, just so we could sort of keep things in the relatively the same structure.
How does that work? I guess in general, just for Go-Go specifically, but also knowing that there's another ongoing the same time that you guys that you're writing your own. How does that process work? Writing something that's 5, 10, 20, 30 issues or more. Like how does that work? The planning stages or the writer's room, if you will, whatever it's called.
Well, we have one editor. We had multiple editors. We had one head editor. Daphne Plevin was the editor over all the Power Ranger books. So any of the books that were done by Boom for the last, 6, 7 years, longer than that, maybe longer, 10 years, I don't know. She was sort of at the middle of it all. So everything that was done was she was reading everything. She was involved in everything. So she knew everything that was going on. But the same thing that was really helpful was Kyle and I are friends. So as I was writing things, I would throw stuff his way. As he was writing stuff, he'd throw things my way. That's how the whole Shattered Grid thing came into existence. Was like I was writing. I think I was 8 issues in, or no, I was 12 issues into Go-Go. I was a year into Go-Go, and he was about 12 issues ahead of me, so like a year ahead of me. And so he was like, "Hey, I'm planning on doing sort of this big event with Draken and having him sort of become this villain, and this idea of bringing in all the other Power Ranger teams and stuff." He's like, "Do you want to be a part of that?" And he's like, "I know you're technically in the past, so that makes things a little more complicated. But if there's an opportunity for you to be involved in this, and we can like link these stories together and make it more," because he knew that he was going to be bringing in Power Ranger teams from the future. It made sense that we had this ability to sort of play with time. And so I was like, "I'll do it, but I'm only going to do it if there's a way to do it that actually supports my story. I don't want to just do this as a tie-in because I was telling a very specific story, and I didn't want the story to be something where it's like, oh yeah, like they do in sort of some of the other big 2 books, where it's just like you're telling a story and then a crossover happens and everything jumps over to this, deals with a crossover, and then it derails the story. So we didn't want to do that. So it turned in. So when he was like, I have this character, we have this idea of using in the Coin This universe, Kimberly has become sort of like the Winter Soldier style bad guy named the Ranger Slayer. We can use that. And I was like, oh, let's that. And that gave me an opportunity to bring somebody in from the future that let a bunch of high school kids go, wow, like that's what our future could be, or like that's what happens if we do something wrong. So it gave me a really great way to sort of dig into the character. So that's why I was like, yeah, let's do it. So that was sort of the way that we worked. It was more just like keeping people abreast. It's like, hey, I'm doing this, you're doing that. And then I think it did help because he was far enough ahead of me that like I could sort of there was enough like lead time that I could sort of be like, okay, I could swerve if there was anything crazy that was going to come up that I had to deal with.
So you didn't have to change a story or something dramatically to okay. That's good.
I don't think there was anything that I ever had to change because of Kyle's run. No, I don't think so.
Well, that's good. What was the hardest Ranger to write for?
Zach is the hardest character. Actually, no, that's a lie. I take that back. The hardest character to write for it's actually, I would say it's Trini. Because like the way I always work is like it's Jason, Kimberly, and Billy are really easy to write for because Jason's usually your leader. So any of the major plot stuff has to go through. He's usually the one making the choices. So his arcs are always he's very active. So it makes him very he's usually the one dealing with how do we keep the team together? How do I keep a morale? Am I doing the right things? Are we doing enough? All that stuff. Kimberly's very easy to write for simply because she usually has a lot of the emotional stuff. She has the stuff with her parents and about the childhood divorce. She also has a lot of the romantic stuff that's involved, whether it was with Matt or with Tommy. So that stuff always felt really easy to dig into. And then if you had any sort of technological problems, Billy easily stepped in there and was like, okay, I'm going to build the thing that helps defeat the thing. And so he would also be dealing with sort of any sort of mystery because he had the technological expertise. The problem with writing for Trini and Zach is that they don't have as strong a function. Zach often turned into a character that was there for a lot of the comedic stuff. Like he was sort of like I tried not to just make him that, but he usually was the counterpoint for humor and calling out things that were a little ridiculous and whatnot. And then I used Trini as a character that was basically very empathetic I just saw her as somebody who's like, she's the one in the group that knows knows everyone's feelings, knows that person's sad, knows that person's happy, knows that person's having a hard time. And she's sort of there to sort of support other people and help carry and pick them up when they're down. So for me, it was hard to, those two characters just didn't inherently have plot stuff that always fell in their favor. And you didn't want to make them like, it was really easy to turn Zach into somebody who would disagree with Jason and then ultimately be wrong because Jason would be, like I didn't want to always just put them at loggerheads.
Right.
So does that all make sense?
No, it does. It does.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So then the easiest you would say would be Jason or Kimberly or Billy, which makes sense. I mean, it does seem like they each kind of had their
lanes. They're very clear defined lanes. So it was easier to write for that stuff.
Yeah. Did the untimely passing of Tweed, did that have any weight on writing her? I mean, I'm not saying that you knew her or anything of that nature. I just mean it as in like for writing for her.
This might be, I don't think this is talking out of school, but the one rule that we had with the way that she passed away was we could never kill her. I think that was one of the rules that we had. This was a Saban rule, not necessarily a Hasbro rule, but it was, we couldn't put her, like, if you, like, we couldn't kill her in the coinless world. Like Jason died, and I think Billy died at one point, and we were like, Trini, it felt weird to kill Trini considering she was dead in real life. So that was kind of off the table. You just have to be a little bit more sensitive to putting her in any, I mean, maybe this is talking out of school, but I remember there was like I don't know who originally made some of the Power Ranger books. I think it was like Bubblegum Press or something like that. And I guess they accidentally have her getting hit by a car or something like that in one of the issues.
Wow.
And I was like, guys, don't do that. Like, I think there was something like that that's out there. So like that, you just have to be very, like, you just got to be very respectful and just realize that you got to be careful about the narrative that you're playing because of the reacts. People are going to have feelings about that. So we were just very careful about making sure we didn't put her in situations that ever mirror what happened to her in real life.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, it's a respectful take. She tragically passed away way early, way too young, and I think it was handled with respect by you guys for not, or for those guidelines for not doing that.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite like story or a favorite issue that you worked on?
Favorite issue.
Or like, subplot or main, or something you came up with that really resonated with a lot of the fans that that you get told about the most.
I get a lot of people really enjoy Ranger Slayer. I think Ranger Slayer is probably the character that I get the most sort of like, I really love that character. I think 90% of that is that Dan Mora did a fantastic job with the design of that character. And so like, it's that thing where it's like, I'm kind of writing in his wake of awesome art. But I do think that the character was like complicated and like a little, like we made her interesting, but like a little tortured, and it made her feel like she had weight and had done some stuff. And there was like a lot of, for somebody who was only in like 4 or 5 issues when we did it, she had a lot of stuff that was like, you could dig into, which was really cool. So I think the Ranger Slayer stuff, I think people are really like, what else did I enjoy? I really liked, there was a subplot that I really liked that I did with Bulk, where Bulk's running for Homecoming King. And there's like him and Skull are like trying to get that. And I love the story where he ultimately like, he's gonna win, but he knows that if he does win, like the mean girl is gonna basically like ruin his relationship with the girl that he kind of likes. So he ultimately throws the election and makes himself look like a fool in order to protect her.
Yeah. And
then when she finds out that he did that, she's like, you don't think I can handle myself? And he's like, I love you so much. And I just love that. So I really like that emotional stuff that I enjoyed. And, there's a lot of, it's funny. I'm trying to think back to all of it. Like there was some stuff that I really enjoyed. I really liked, it was really fun creating creating sort of like the new Green Ranger. That was fun. Like I didn't expect to do that. That was never, it's so funny because I've had people kind of accused me of like creating Matt to sort of put myself in the Power Rangers. Like, so you created a character that kind of looks like you, that dates Kimberly and then becomes the Green Ranger. And I was like, first off, I am not as handsome as Matt. So that's not. But second, I was just like, the idea of turning him into the Green Ranger was like a weird sort of like organic storytelling. Like when Kyle created the Psycho Dagger with Grace, I kind of realized that there was like, and its whole purpose was it was like a power source. And then I had the green, and I asked I asked Daphne, I was like, whatever happened to the green dragon coin after he lost power? Like, what happens to the coin in the show? And they never talk about it.
Exactly.
So I was like, so why didn't anybody try to make a new Green Ranger? Like you could do that. And in the book, I was like, we could do that in the comic book and it would feel like we had the pieces there. So that was the fun part. It was like weird to like, we were just writing stories. And then we like realized that if we tied A to B to C, we could create a new Ranger. And that was really fun. So like, I really liked that element. It was never it wasn't me ever trying to replace Tommy. Although I have heard that Jason was not a fan of that decision. And
he certainly was not.
No, he was not a fan of that choice. But you know what? At the end of the day, look, it's the comics, man. Like it's fine. Matt Cook does not exist. So I don't think you have to worry about him running into him and then making that awkward in real life. So
exactly, yeah. And you know what? Honestly, though, that those type of things that I don't want to say out of left field because that makes it sound less than, and I don't mean that at all. But those things that you weren't expecting, like bringing Matt back as a new Green Ranger, a Ranger Slayer showing up, Lord Draken, the World of the Coinless, the Omega Rangers, like all this stuff happening. Excuse me, sorry. It's what made these comics, I think, so riveting for so long. I mean, they had a fairly decent run, which I think all that new blood, if it was just the constant same retelling of what we've already seen in the shows, I think it still would have sold well, but maybe only for a year or two,
Yeah. No, the Omega Rangers are also the thing I get talked to about the most because a lot of people really like that we were able to give Jason. In fact, even Austin and Walter both have said that they really loved that we did that. Like they were like, "Oh, thank you for giving us more adventures and stuff like that," and creating the idea that we just went to like a peace conference, which I don't know what that is. But exactly. Yeah, it's like not a lot of kids doing that in real life. They were very I remember I was at a convention and Austin was like 3 or 4, we were in like Allentown or something like that. And we had a little downtime and I walked over and I gave him a copy of the first run of Go-Go. And I was like, hey, I'd love you to read this and see how you feel, how I've done about the character. And he read it and was very, very complimentary of it. And then I told him what we were doing with the Omega Rangers. And he was like, oh my God, that's awesome. Like, I really love that you guys are going to give us sort of a second life and stuff. And so like I think that part is fun that we were able to create a narrative reason for a very complicated reality. So
I honestly think because you could tell, and I believe you may have said it in an interview back in the day that the run was going to kind of mirror the show. I remember hearing that or knowing that. And so when they weren't just written off, it actually was really exciting to me because out of the original 6, Jason, Zach, and Trini are my favorites. So to still have them around, it was like, oh, cool. I can go on another, I can pretend I'm 5 years old again and go on another adventure with them. That was really the Omega Ranger. I'm just going to ask, it's not even on my list, but talk to me how the Omega Rangers came to be. What was that brainstorm like?
That came up. That actually, I have given credit to him, and I will give it to Kyle and I. So Kyle we were finishing Shattered Grid, and we were like midway through it, and I think we were having a hard time coming up with something. I can't remember what it was, but we were having coffee, talking about how we were going to blend the two things together. And as a writer, you never want to work on the thing that's due. You want to work on the thing that's fun. And so Kyle and I were like, what? Like because he knew I was going to stay on after he was going to leave. He's like, Shattered Grid's probably going to be the end for me. And I was like, great. And he's like, you can pick up the pieces afterwards. I was like, thanks, buddy. And and I was like, well, what would I do? like what I like, because I wasn't really sure. I was like, well, we'll bring the White Ranger in and we'll do some stuff with that and maybe we can move forward. But we started talking about it, and it was in the conversations with him about what had originally happened on the show. We were like, well, what if they didn't, what if the peace conference was just like a front? Like, what if they actually became like X-Force for the Power Rangers, and they were flying around under sort of hidden and doing stuff that, like, if the Power Rangers were dealing with Earth, who's dealing with the rest of the universe, right?
Right.
And so that's where that came. It just came out of a real question of like, why wouldn't they, like, we were just like, why don't they ever come back? Like, who just leaves their family and never comes back? And so we were like, we've got to figure out a way to both justify it and then also sort of use it as and they were like, wow, we can actually tell. And what I loved about it was, one of the hard parts about writing the book that's sort of like running parallel to the show is everybody kind of knows what's going to happen. You're like, you there's certain people you can't kill. There's certain things you can't do, right? If we wanted to maintain the canon. And so we were like, the cool thing about the Omega Rangers was it opened up all this storytelling that I could do where the audience didn't know what was going to happen, and I could kill anybody and I could get into any trouble. And also I could bring in other shows, because we knew obviously with, Lost Galaxy, like Andros was out there, and Scorpina, or not Scorpina. Why am I blanking on her dang name? Astronema. Astronema is out. Like, we knew that they were out there at the same time that the Rangers were. So we was like, now we can actually use this as sort of a way to bring in all these other shows in an organic way through characters that I, as a fan of the original, if we're doing, like, we can do it through a Mighty Morphin lens. And so that was the thing that was really fun. So it just came out of both things. It came out of just like conversations about how do we just build up the story, and also trying to create new storytelling areas that were fertile, that were things that could be new and exciting and felt organic, and that fans would be like, oh, that's cool, I haven't seen that before. So
yeah, I think that was one of the coolest things about the run with the Omega Rangers, was seeing those interactions with the other season villains or later villains, because like you said, they were out there. What is Dark Spectre doing? What is Astronema doing? And Ecliptor and all these other, villains or even heroes that we meet later on. Andros and Zane and all that. That was really cool to see that kind of commingled.
Yeah, I really liked, that was another fun thing I liked, was the Andros storyline that he did at the end. I think it was right near the end, which was like, we were talking about, that came out of a conversation. I was like, well, who's left out there that we haven't used? And they're like, well, Andros is there. And I was like, wait, so we could do Andros right after the death of his planet? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, he's in a bad place.
Yep.
And they were like, yeah. I was like, we could. And then I remember there was an action figure that was released, which was, I think it was him in the cloak. In the end. But what was really cool is if you took the fabric cloak off, he had this whole just black outfit with a black, and it looked like a stealth suit. And I was like, can I use that in the comic? Because it was an action figure they just made. And I was like, and they were like, yeah. And I was like, so I got to use that in the comic, and I thought it looked so. I love the idea that he was sort of like, I'm not even gonna wear the Power Ranger. I'm not even gonna wear that. He's so angry with what had happened. It's a little like what happened with like the opposite of Wolverine and Deadpool and Wolverine, where it's like he's not going to wear the suit until he needs to. And so I love that. I love that we were able to use an action figure that wasn't really used and give the suit sort of like canon and like that part. So and it was fun to see the idea of like Andros. What's Andros before he heals? Like what was that path from him, and how I love that Jason, after losing his dad, is able to sort of be there for Andros and be like, I'm going to help you get through this horrible thing and get better on the other side. And I really enjoyed that concept of using sort of that with the Death Ranger and all that stuff. So
yeah, the Death Ranger's another one. I feel like there is so much to talk to you about. It's not even funny. All of it, the storylines, the Death Ranger, that was amazing. But we are creeping up here on an hour. We got about 10. There's so much more that I want to talk to you about. So we're gonna have to have you back, because there is definitely going to be a part. There has to be a part 2 to this, because I want to ask you about Rogue Sun and other things too, real quick. But to put a bow on today's part of Power Rangers, why did you leave?
I'd done like 100 issues, and it just felt like some of it was, I thought I was kind of repeating myself a little bit. And I was like, I just thought, okay, like I think to this point I've done the most Power Ranger books of any writer. And so when with 100 coming up, it just felt like there was an opportunity to sort of hand the baton off to somebody else. And you don't want to be too greedy. I've been doing because I took over after Kyle, and then I was doing. But at one point, I was doing both Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers. I was doing the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Turtle crossover, and I was doing like the Ranger Slayer one shot. And I felt like this is like I got to let someone else play with the toys a little bit. So it just felt like with 100 coming up, that was sort of a natural opportunity to sort of hand off the book to Melissa and let her run with it. And she had been an executive at Saban and then at Hasbro, and she knew that series really, really well and was really excited to be a part of it, had some really good ideas. And it just felt like, yeah, like it's cool. And like I said, I was sort of expecting to be gone, but I've come back several times. I'm still doing stuff on the side. I've still done a few things for them in the past. So like I never completely gone. But yeah, it just felt like it. And also, monthly comic books is, especially with Power Rangers, it's a lot of work. I think we never missed a date. I don't think we ever shipped late, which is crazy considering like with Rogue Sun, how often we ship late. So like, it's just it makes me respect just how hard, how impressive Daphne was at keeping the trains running, because it's hard to do that 5 years straight. So
real quick, one last question on Power Rangers. What did you think of the culmination of Darkest Hour, the wrap up? What is it? What were you? Did you know that it was going to kind of go? Did she finish your dream, or was this all Melissa's?
I think the only so when she took over, I didn't leave her any like standing orders or anything or any story stuff. I think the only two things I asked was like, I'd love you to wrap up the Matt storyline, because I wasn't able to do that. I was like, I'd love you to finish that in some way, because I didn't know what she was going to do. I was like, wrap up Matt in some way, whether he's the Green Ranger and stays that way or loses the power or whatever. But I was like, wrap that up for me, because I wasn't able to get to that. And I was like, and I was like, have fun with the Omega Rangers. Do whatever you want with them. Like, you can do anything you want. And so that was the only things that I didn't have a say in it. I was just like, I was like, go with God is what I said. I was like, just do whatever. You're not going to make me mad no matter what you do with them. So have fun with them. But like, yeah, when it came to the larger stuff, like bringing in all of the bigger story stuff, I didn't really have any say in that. I just sort of, I got to read it like as a fan, which was fun, because it was like the first time in like 4 years where I was reading a book and didn't know it was going to happen. Right. So that was really fun. But yeah, I thought you did a great job. That's a really hard target to hit, to make it all feel like one giant story after that long, and tie together so many big moves and stuff and bring in so many different characters. It's hard, and I'm really impressed. And I know she's doing Prime now, which is with the new series, and so I know that's people seem to like that. So like, yeah, I mean, I as Kyle and I have said, we were lucky because we didn't actually have to end anything. We just sort of finished our story and then like rode off into the sunset, and then we left someone else to deal with it. So that's she had the hardest of the three jobs. What
made you I'm sorry, one more question on Power Rangers. What made you end Jason's storyline the way you did with the Death Ranger and losing his connection to the grid?
So my choice for that was, I knew I was going to end my run, and I thought, because I knew he was ultimately going to become the Gold Ranger. Gold Ranger? Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. Yes, sorry. Like, sometimes I lose track of this stuff. The Gold Ranger. So I was like, well, he's not going to be the Omega Ranger forever.
Right.
So it felt like a moment where I could kind of end his story, but yet keep him, basically end his story and go, that's his end of the story, but you guys know where this goes, and he's not done forever. Like, I didn't have to, like, he was a person I could take off the board and yet still go, but he has continuing adventures, and this is why he ultimately becomes the Gold Ranger, because he's now severed his power with the Omega Rangers. And I could sort of create a new evolution of that character. So it was just, for me, because the story had sort of started with Go-Go with Jason and his parents and sort of his journey, it felt like a nice sort of ending to be able to do the same thing. And, you know, sometimes you have to take, you know, I know some people were like, why did you take him off the board? I'm like, well, you know, he had 125 issues. It's not like, you know, like, it's not like he's gone forever. Like, I know Melissa brought him back into the series, so I was fine with that. But I just thought that it felt like a really fun way to. It felt like a culmination and his sacrifice of his powers to sort of save everybody, and sort of that idea that after the stuff that I'd written with him and his father after his mother had passed away and his dad being sick and him sort of having to step into that role. It felt like a natural sort of end to that character. So that's why. There wasn't anything going on. It wasn't. I've heard some rumors about stuff about like that maybe he was taken off the board. That's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of him-hawing there. There's a large, you know, speculation online that it was because of Austin's, you know, personal issues, which I when I heard people say that, I was like, that doesn't really make sense, because I mean, yes, Austin played Jason, but like, you know, it's not, it didn't really make sense to me that would be, but you know, I knew that there was that speculation.
I can tell you verbatim that it had nothing to do with any of the stuff that's gone on with him. Yeah.
So, man, Ryan, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. Legitimately, I'm like a kid in a candy shop. But I really want to know about Rogue Sun. Full disclosure, I actually found out about Rogue Sun when I reached out to talk to you about coming on here for Power Rangers. So this is kind of new, but I've been doing a little bit of you know, research on it. It looks really interesting. What can you tell me? Like, where did this idea come from? What's the backstory here?
Well, it came from, you know, when I was like halfway through Power Rangers, Kyle and I were still friends, and he went over to Image and created a book called Radiant Black. And it's sort of the way he's been pitched is just sort of like, Kyle's texting me right now. What do you know?
Hello, Kyle.
Yeah, I think he's in India, so like he's on the other side. I don't know. I have no idea what time it is where he's texting me from right now. So he was doing a book called Radiant Black, which is basically sort of like a millennial Power Ranger style Tokusatsu book. And he was having a great time with it. And he's like, I really want to do this. And we were at a USC football game. And he was like, do you have any superhero ideas that you want to do? And I was like, well, I have this idea about this kid who's like, I was like, this is like, it's about a kid named Dylan who's like 17 and he lives in New Orleans, and his dad left when he was a little kid, and he's sort of, and he's a little bit of a bully. He's like, you know, most stories about the kids that get pushed into the lockers. When you meet him, he's the guy pushing people into lockers, and because he's never had a father figure in his life. And so he finds out that his dad passed away. And so when he goes to the will reading, he meets his dad's whole other family, his 2 other kids and his widow and all that stuff. And they live in a giant mansion, and has obviously had this whole life. But what he discovers is his dad actually didn't die in a car accident. His dad is actually a superhero called Rogue Sun, and that he has actually left the mantle and those powers to Dylan and not anybody in his own family. And so in an effort to sort of, so Dylan becomes Rogue Sun, but in order to use those powers, he only takes up the mantle to sort of prove to his dad that it could be better than him, as sort of spit in the face kind of thing. But the problem is, whenever he puts on the suit and uses the Sunstone and becomes Rogue Sun, there's a ghost of his father standing right there next to him, basically criticizing and telling him all the things that he needs to do and wrong. It's sort of like if what's his name from in the Iron Man suit, the voice in it, Jarvis. Yeah, imagine if Jarvis was your dad and like was the worst dad in the world. And so the whole story is about a kid who never knew his dad, and in order to become a superhero, has to work with the person he hates the most in the world. And it's a father-son story, and it's a gothic superhero stuff. So we use all of the sort of like the monsters and stuff as like sort of the rogues gallery and stuff. And so I pitched that all to him at the game. He was like, that sounds awesome. Let's do this. And so we did it. And then we created the Massiverse, which is a collection of a lot of the writers from Power Rangers. Matt Groom is one of the writers on there. He has a book called Go Fern and Go Red. Melissa Flores did a book called The Dead Lucky. And so and Michael Basudel, who has been one does the Ranger podcast, he's like our editor and kind of runs the whole thing. And so we basically created our own little tokusatsu inspired superhero universe, which was a way of us being able to sort of do stories that we weren't able to really do in the Power Ranger because of lore and because of licensors and whatnot. We were able to sort of do stuff that was a little bit off the beaten path. And for me, it was amazing because I got to do a book at Image, and I grew up. The reason I got into comics was because of Image, was because of those superhero books. So to be able to actually have my own superhero as part of that universe and part of that lore is just like a crazy dream come true. So we're just about to release issue 25. And we've gone through a lot of stuff. It's been fun. We had a choose your own adventure issue and with issue 7, which was really fun, which is sort of, did you ever do those books when you were a kid where you had to read? And then, so we do a comic book issue of that. That's a very sort of meta comic book. With issue 19, we did a flip book issue, which I'm really proud of, which was, 24 pages, but it's all the same art on one side and then all the art flipped on the other side, and the narration is from 2 different characters. So when you read it, it's all the same art, but the dialogue and what you learn is different. And I thought that was something I'd always wanted to do because it's something that's only something you can do in comic books. And so we're always trying to find ways to sort of like bend the medium and break stuff. Like if you've read any of the Radiant Black stuff, Kyle is going crazy with that stuff. Like there's an entire issue that's done entirely in black light that is like story driven. He did a thing called the Catalyst War, which was this giant. There's a point where his main character, Radiant Black, there's 2 different people who are both using the power of the Radiant, and then when the big bats who created the Radiants come to Earth, in order to sort of stop them, they have 2 different like timelines, and so the book was released each month with 2 different versions of every story. So you saw if Nathan was winning, it was Radiant Black, what would go happen there, and if you were following Marshall, who's the other character, what would happen there. And so there's this weird kind of cool, and he didn't tell anybody about it. It was kind of a big reveal. So like we're just trying to find things that are a little different and play with the medium a little bit and try stuff. So yeah, so if you like traditional superhero books with just a little bit of a different vibe and a little bit of different character stuff, like check out the Massiverse. That's something we've been working on for a while now.
That sounds fair. I mean, just from the short amount of time that I've been looking into it, I'm like, wow, I need to take a peek at these and get some. Can you order them at normal comic book stores, or is it just like a website?
Yeah, I think we have a sale going on right now. If you go to Black Market Narrative, which is like Black Market, I think that's what it is. Black Market Narrative. You can get them all online there and order them directly from us. I think there's like 6 volumes of Radiant Black, and there's 4 volumes of Rogue Sign. I think volume 4 comes out in March, so we're at 3 volumes right now. So yeah, okay. You can get them all on the website and whatnot. So yeah.
Okay. And then on the website, is there like a reading order and stuff for everybody so they can?
Well, thank you for asking. So one of the things that we were very clear about is you don't have to read all the books. Like that's like if you just want to read Radiant Black, you pick up Radiant Black Volume 1, read it right through. If you want to read Rogue Sun, you read Volume 1, you read it right through. Our approach has always been to make it like Invincible, where it's like we don't want. This is I'm said this, and this is not a diss at Boom. I love Boom. I have a great relationship with them. We learned a lot of lessons about how hard it is to create reading orders when you do that. And I've had 1,000 people ask me at cons, what order do I read the Power Ranger books in? And I'm like, I don't know. Like it depends on how you want to do it. So for us, we made it very clear. You don't have to read all of them because you don't have to. So if it's like, oh man, I'd like to read that stuff, but I don't want to read, I don't want to read 27 volumes. You can just pick up volume 1 of any book and read it straight through, and you don't have to know anything about the other series. So we do a thing every year with a thing called Supermassive. We have our crossover issue where we have all the characters come together and get like a little adventure, but that's its own thing that's sort of disconnected from all that stuff. So even if you don't even have to read the crossover to know what's going on. So we just try to make it easier for everybody because we know everybody, comics are expensive and we all have a lot of time. So we just try to make it simple and straightforward.
If I had one complaint about Boom, it is in the collected, you're like, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to, and you have to go like find another. And yeah. I wish they would just release it in the reading order. Mm-hmm. So you can just read it. Cause that is my one complaint. I love Boom too. Truthfully, I do, but that is my one complaint. But
yeah, I mean, it's hard because like if you read the trades are different than the collected editions. like, right? Because like, if you read, like, for instance, if you read Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers, do you read it Mighty Morphin Power? Do you read it Volume 1 Mighty Morphin, Volume 1 Power Rangers, Volume 2 Mighty Morphin, Volume Power? Or that's one version, right? You can read that way. But if you get the collected editions, you go issue to issue and not trade to trade. Right. So even in the releasing of the stuff, there's no real way to read it. It kind of just depends on. I always just tell everybody the easiest way is to read release order, just because that's the way it's the way it's been written. So you should probably go with that direction. Right. But I also realize that some people, when they want to read both Go-Go and Mighty Morphin or Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers, like, I just realized, like, just, go with God. It's a tough world, and I don't envy you, because you put a gun in my head right now. I couldn't tell you how to read it. So.
It gets confusing, that's for sure. I am going to be looking into the what do you call them, the collected ones, where it's issue for issue, right?
Like, there's the hardcovers, the big hardcovers, I believe, that like you can read, like, they did a big Kickstarter or something like that. That is like they give you kind of an official reading order, because the volumes are sort of told what you can do, and I think it goes from like Mighty Morphin to Shattered Grid to Beyond the Grid to Absolute Power to the Tarian War. I don't know, but like, I think it's like written out. Yeah, sorry, I wrote over 100 issues of Power Rangers. It's hard to keep track of it all.
It's all good. Ryan, do you have time just for a couple quick questions from the chat?
Sure, man.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Eric here wants to know, is there anything that you've written that you wish you would have done differently, thinking about it now?
Jeez, how much time do we have? Everything. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say anything specific, because like that, the broad answer to that is yes. Everything in hindsight, there was little things you wish you could change. There's little decisions you made, or like, I think usually when it comes down to writing stuff, it's time and space. I just finished, it hasn't even been announced yet, but I just finished another mini series that I did. That should be announced in the next like 6 months or so. And
for Power Rangers?
Even in no, not for Power Rangers. Yeah. That'll get me in trouble, man.
Yeah, I tried to trip you up. Yeah. That's horrible of me. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But I just finished one, and I'm happy about it, and I like it. It's just that at the time I was writing 4 other books at the time. I was writing Rogue Sun and the Atom Project and some other stuff, and so that book didn't get some of the attention it needed in the early stages of the outline. And so when I got into actually writing the book, there was some stuff that I had to sort of like things you think you knew, that like, oh, I knew exactly what that was going to be. And then you get there and you're like, oh, I actually didn't know what that is. So like, I think that's the one thing. It's all of it is every single book. I wish I could go back and do like a pass on and clean up and fix some of the dialogue and make things a little smarter. But the only ones that really get you are the ones where you either didn't have enough time to outline it properly in the beginning, and you didn't have enough time to get those pages, to get that stuff done, because you had to hit your deadlines. Because like monthly comics are a beast sometimes.
Realist Goji fan, hello Jordan. He has a better question. He goes, Team Green or Team Red? He must have missed the beginning part, but I just wanted to hear it again, so I'll ask it again.
Is this like a recurring thing on this show? Is this a big part of the show? All right.
We argue about it all the time.
I'm Team Pink. Team Pink.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? That's great. All right, quickly, rapid fire, because I don't want to keep you too much longer. You've been so gracious with your time. You said you got to meet some of the original cast. Just real quickly, I'm going to name them off. Tell me what you think about them, or a funny story or anything you want to say. Amy Jo.
And supremely talented writer. Just lovely person, and I have gotten to read many of her screenplays, and she's wonderful, and I've learned a lot from her. So I didn't expect that, but it's been really fun to meet somebody who has really great instincts and makes you a better writer from reading their stuff.
She also seems like a super sweet person.
She is. She is awesome. Yes. People say don't meet your heroes. You know, if you're lucky enough to meet Amy Jo, get a chance. She's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Walter Jones.
That man is the handsomest and best dancer I've ever seen. I swear to God. Like, and he's also just, I've never seen any, you know what? The best thing I could say about Walter is there's a lot of things I could talk for Walter. Like, there's a guy who understands the energy that he has with people and is so generous with it. Like, this sounds weird. Like when I worked at Bad Robot, Tom Cruise would come in every once in a while, and Tom Cruise understands that when he talks to you, that this is a big deal for you. I don't mean that in like I don't mean that in a conceited way. He knows that when people talk to him, they're going to talk to people about this conversation, and he's very good at making you feel listened to and like that it's important. And Walter has that same thing. Walter, when he talks to you, I've seen him talk to fans and to everybody. He's just so like keenly aware of being of how to make you feel special, and like it's a wonderful gift. He's a really, really cool guy.
David Yost.
The sweetest guy ever. Like really, like they're all I wish I had bad things to say, but I don't. Like yeah, David's great. David still checks in on me every once in a while on stuff. Like my dog had an injury. My dog had his got paralyzed for a little while.
Oh.
And yeah, and David checked in like months after that, and like just randomly was like, "Hey, I wanted to know how your dog's doing," and like out of nowhere just to check. And I was like, that was very kind of him and stuff. And also his apparel, the affirmative apparel, is awesome. I own several of his hoodies. They're fantastic.
Right on. Austin.
Austin's great. I've only been around Austin a few times. He's also got like he's like Captain America a little bit, man. Like he's just like there's a little bit of an intimidation thing when you talk to him because you're just like you're Jason, man. And he's just got such a strong energy that it's easy to be like, oh yeah, I'd have followed you in the battle against putties, 100%.
Yeah. For real. Yeah. Eric and I had the pleasure of meeting Austin 2 years ago, I think it was, at a convention, and the convention ended up being kind of a bust. There was not a lot of people that showed up, and which was awesome because we kind of got to chat with him probably a little bit longer than we would have if there was like a mile long line. And yeah, he seemed very nice. He seemed like a very cool
he
cat.
is great. Yeah.
Did you get to meet the late JDF?
I did not. I knew he knew who I was, and he knew I knew him. We passed each other a few times. I remember he had the Legend of the White Dragon panel in front of me, and we were in the same room, and there was like 1,000 people in there, and I came right after him. So he leaves with all the people, and there was like 8 people left. And I was like, oh, and it was like my panel talking about my Power Rangers stuff. And I was like, welcome to the Legend of the White Parrot. Thanks. So yeah, but no, I never got to meet him. I know he was, like I know a lot of people had some really great experiences with him, and he was a great ambassador for the brand. And it's very tragic. I know where I was when I heard the news, so that was awful. But I think if there's anybody who ever sort of left their imprint on the brand and on fans, like, it's rare. It's really cool even though he's dead, he's never really gonna be dead. Like he's gonna live on in our minds, and we can see him on the show, and he's going to live on in the comics and other things. He's never going to be completely gone. So like, he has a little bit, not many people can have immortality, but he has it. So.
Right. For sure. Yeah. He, like I said at the beginning of this, I wasn't the biggest Tommy fan, but I respect what JDF did for a lot of the fans of Power Rangers and just the brand in general. Cause he definitely did help carry it and shoulder it for a long time. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, my friend Ryan, thank you so much for joining. I don't want to be rude and take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining us here at the MWA. We'd love to have you back if you're interested, definitely. I feel like there's so much more to talk about. We barely even scratched the surface of your time at DC. And I want to know more about Rogue Sun. Next time we talk, I'm going to have some issues read so that way I can have more questions on it. And thank you for your work. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. And I'll do an official or personal goodbye to you when we end the stream here. But so that'll do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and for all of you that watch later on once this has ended, we appreciate you. Check out Ryan and his work at blackmarketnarrative.com. Check out Rogue Sun. That sounds freaking awesome. And as always, go to your comic book stores and pick up the older issues of Power Rangers, where you can listen and read all of Ryan's work, and so on. So Ryan, thank you again so much, and until next time, everybody, embrace the attitude.